happy Friday. We'll keep this quick, but we're really excited to have Pat Figley with Splan on today with visitor management for our visitor management webinar. Visitor management's a hot topic right now for a lot of organizations for obvious reasons with the coronavirus pandemic. And just in general, organizations want to know who is coming into their building. And we'll kind of take more of a deep dive into that. So, Pat, without further ado, feel free to take over.
Well, thank you so much, Patrick. I appreciate it. I'm hoping everybody can see my screen. Can you confirm that you can see my screen, Pat?
Yeah, you are all good.
Okay, great. So what I want to talk about today is visitor management and people entering your workplace, whether they're employees, contractors, visitors, and such. You may not know much about Splan, but we are a solution with customers around the world, folks like Visa. They're in about 75 countries, and NetApp, I think they're in about 60 countries. And we did NetApp with Stone Security, so they're a very successful client for both of us. We've rolled that out across multiple continents. And they continue to upgrade and use the software, which is very exciting. I'm going to talk a little bit more about them also when I talk about COVID, because they're doing some great things for access based on some of the things we do with COVID. Just as a quick introduction to the overall solution before I jump into the COVID module itself, Splan is a browser-based solution, meaning that you access via your browser. There's no workstation software that you have to put on workstations. It can be hosted, though, on-premise or in the cloud. So you can put it on your own servers, or you can put it on servers in the cloud. It does have the capability to do pre-registration, i.e. invite people. And most of our customers are doing that through the Outlook Calendar plugin. It makes it really easy because it's a single process. You're setting up an Outlook Calendar meeting, and what it does is it sends the pre-registration as well as that calendar meeting. And then if the calendar meeting changes it because they're tied together. So it changes that visitor meeting as well. We've also got the capability for people to walk in, and you can have different notifications that go back to a host or a delegate or whomever you want them to go to based on the type of visit. If it's a pre-registered visit, then you probably just want to get a notification when the person comes in because you're expecting them. But if it's a walk-in guest, then you might want the ability to approve or deny that guest, because if you're on the phone in a meeting or you really just don't even want to see the person, you can deny the guest as well. And then they get a notification back. The guest gets a notification back that you're tied up, or please call to set up an appointment, or whatever you want that notification to say. We've also got the capability for contractors to come in, and with contractors, you can store in the system contractor background checks, certifications, things like that you will need or want to have in place in order to pre-register that contractor. Now, the employee can pre-register a contractor, or if you work with a vendor who sends you multiple contractors, that vendor can send in the pre-registration request as well. So when people come in, they can be employees, they can be guests, they can be contractors, they can be also what we call authorized personnel. Authorized personnel, a little bit different category. We work with a number of schools, and the schools generally want to authorize parents to pick up children. So this Mr. Smith is authorized to pick up Tommy Smith, but today he's also authorized to pick up, Jimmy Jones, because Mrs. Jones called and said, hey, I want Mr. Smith to pick up Jimmy Jones. So, but outside of that, they're not really authorized to pick up anybody else. So the authorized personnel gives us that capability to authorize people to. Also, if you're a gym, and you have members who just check in, they're authorized personnel. So when somebody comes in, there's several ways they can check in. They can check in with what we call a lobby ambassador, which could be a receptionist, a guard sitting there, somebody there to greet them. They can also check in at a kiosk. And now with the COVID module, we have the touchless check-in using your mobile phone, which I'm going to talk about when I drop down into the COVID module specifically. We try to make the process really easy. You can have a kiosk and scan a QR code that came with the pre-registration email. You could scan a government or a non-government ID. We do have the ability, if you want, to capture pictures and then use your facial recognition. Now, keep in mind we are GDPR compliant, meaning that we are compliant with privacy regulations for Europe. Also, we're compliant with privacy regulations in the US that different states have, or Canada. And the data that you capture, the data that you store, is really up to you. And that could be based on location as well. So it is a multi-location system, which I'm going to talk about in just a minute. But locations can be set up with their own workflows, their own privacy requirements, all of that. They can share global requirements, or they could be individual requirements for each location. Again, you can do things like NDAs or informational or safety videos that you want to have acknowledged, and that can be by location as well. So, for example, if you're a manufacturing company and you want to let people into headquarters and all they need to do is sign an NDA, you can do that. If they're going to the manufacturing plant and they need to see a video and acknowledge a safety video, we can do that as well. Or if you just want them to see COVID policies or other kinds of policies and then acknowledge those policies, you can do that also. We also have the questionnaires for the virus risk assessment, which again, I'm going to talk about on my next slide. So we can also enforce social distancing. We have internal and external watch list capability. Internal is a watch list you set up yourself. External is a watch list that you might want to connect with an outside service, for example, a background check service or a criminal history service or things like that. And we can recommend them, or we can connect with other services that you may have. We do integrate with all of the major access control systems, whether it's S2, which we've done a lot of work with the Stone Security team, or whether it's Onell, AMAG, Secure, which I'm sure we can work with those, or Genetec, or AMAG, Avigilon, Brevo, just really a list of about 12 to 15 access control systems. With the access control integration, it is bi-directional, by the way, so you can pre-approve access levels that you wish to provision to, say, visitors or contractors that are coming in, so that when they check in, that access is then activated for them and they would get a badge. We can also provision employee temporary badges, which means we are reaching into that access control system, pulling the access levels and provisioning those to a temporary badge for that employee. At the same time, we're deactivating their permanent badge. So now they have the one temporary badge with their access levels on it that's active, and the permanent badge is deactivated. So from a security standpoint, they don't have two active badges at the same time. Notifications, as I mentioned earlier, going back to the host, can go by email, by phone call, by text. We have integration with Wi-Fi, as well as other integrations we have built. We have different customers asking us to build integrations. For example, Everbridge. We have our own emergency notification visitor broadcast message system, but we also, because customers have requested Everbridge, we have that integration with Everbridge as well. It is multi-location. As I mentioned earlier, we have customers with locations around the world. They could be set up in different languages as well. For example, Metadata has facilities set up in Japanese. The nice thing is, though, that if I go there, I can check in English. We've also got a capability to support multiple other organizations that might be on the campus or might be in the building. We do that with multi-tenant, where each individual tenant has their own setup. They've got their own employees, their own visitors. They run their own reports. They see their own information. They don't see other tenants' information. So again, that's in the multi-tenant solution. As I mentioned, we've got different areas that you can do authentication and approvals. So, for example, at pre-registration, you can do approvals. So, for example, if you've got that vendor sending up contractors, that can go through an approval process. If you have employees that have to get approvals from management in order to pre-register somebody, that can go through an approval process. At check-in, you can have that approval process. So, multiple areas you can have approvals. Also, as I mentioned earlier, we have the emergency management. If you need to contact the security team because something is happening, you can do that right within the Splan system. You can also send out visitor instructions, such as mustering instructions, etc., as well. And then we've got a very full complement of reports and dashboards. Reports can be run on demand. They can be scheduled. All of that information can be automatically emailed to somebody and then also exported into CSV, PDF, and other formats. So if you have an auditor that has to have an audit report run once a month, automatically set it up, automatically email it. They can export that data if they've got some charts and graphs they want to put that information into. We've also got a capability for somebody to come in and drop off a package, whether it is a carrier coming up to a kiosk and picking from a list of people to that package has to go to, or whether they work with a lobby ambassador to check that package in. Once it gets checked in, you pick from the list of people it's going to go to, they get a notification, and then they sign off on it, and the package has been tracked. And then also, finally, we have event management. Event management gives you a capability to have an event. If you are having a shareholder meeting, a plant tour, a training class, something that you want to set up as an event, and then basically you can check in contractors to that event, you can check in visitors to that event, you can check in attendees to that event, whatever you want to do, but that is all in the event management solution. So as you can see, it's really a broad solution. The nice thing is, though, it is configurable. You could decide what you want to do out of the box, and then you can also always add things on later. So if you say, hey, I just want a simple visitor management solution, we're going to check people in, print a badge, run a report, that's all I want, you can set it up like that. We can have you up and running in a week or two. And then later I want to add event management or package delivery, or later I want to connect with my access control system, we can do that as well. My next slide is really a high-level overview of the COVID modules. I'm going to go into each of these in detail, so I'm not going to provide a lot of detail while we're looking at this screen, but it does include things like the touchless check-in, the questionnaire for staff as well as visitors, and that's really interesting. That's one that NetApp is taking advantage of, as well as other customers that we have, where the staff is answering questions before they come in the morning, right? And with NetApp, they're simply sending them an email, whether to come in or not come in, and then they're communicating that back to the lobby ambassador to know whether this person should be coming in or not. We do have other customers that are actually activating badges based on those questions. So in other words, their badge is deactivated at the end of the day or the end of their shift or every 24 hours. And in order to reactivate that badge, they have to take the questionnaire. We do have the capability for temperature screening as well. And then shifts management, which I'm going to talk about in some of the detail slides. I just mentioned policy-based badge activation, which we can do, based on those questionnaires, based on temperature screening, based on shifts. We can do all of that with policy-based badge activation. We do have the capability to follow up after a visit and ask somebody is having symptoms or experiencing symptoms of the COVID, and then run a contact tracing report. We can also enforce social distancing based on capacity. You can set up programs and events if you're doing testing of employees. They can use their badge to sign in. And again, keep in mind that the data that you store, for example, a temperature, right, is up to you. Sometimes you've got rules and regulations like HIPAA that do not allow you to store a temperature. That's fine. You can store pass-fail. So if you have to run a report for the Department of Health to make sure that somebody who came in actually passed the temperature screening, but you're not going to store the temperature, you can do things like that with the software. Very, very configurable solution. All the information is stored in a SQL-based database. We can report on it very well, and then the data that you store is up to you. You can also have, from the mobile phone, you can have incident management, emergency response, and facility disinfection. So now I'm going to drop down into some of the details of each of these. The first is the visitor touchless check-in. This works very nicely in that in the lobby, you will have posted a QR code. Now, if somebody received a pre-registration email, they would have a link to a mobile app. They can use the mobile app, or they can simply use the browser on their phone. So, excuse me, similar to an airline app, I travel a lot on United, so I use the United airline app. But if I'm going to travel on American, I want to do some things, I'm probably just going to use the browser on my phone, because I just don't travel that much. But so if it's a frequent visitor, they're probably going to want to download the app. If they're coming in for one time, they're probably going to use their browser. But what they do is they come in, they scan that QR code, they use the camera on their phone to scan the QR code that's posted in the lobby, and that begins the check-in process. So if they're pre-registered, and it's very similar to what they're doing on Kiosk, but they're doing it on their mobile phone. So if they're a pre-registered guest, they're going to go through that process. If they are a walk-in guest, they're going to do through that process. But they can do everything, such as sign an NDA, take the COVID-19 questions, watch any kind of a video, acknowledge that video. Everything is done on their mobile phone. The same thing is true with employees and contractors. So contractors or employees who are set up in the system, they can use the mobile app for all of their check-in needs at the entrances, test centers, etc. You can enable facial recognition at kiosks. So, for example, if you want employees to come in, now most of the time you might have a picture of an employee in your Active Directory. So when we integrate with Active Directory, we can pull that picture. For visitors, it's a little bit more touchy because sometimes you're not allowed to store a picture of a visitor. But again, we give you the capability to ask, can we store your picture? But once a picture is in the system, you can use facial recognition. We've also are now releasing some integration with different mobile credentialing systems as well. And then also they have a QR code on their mobile phone they can use for entry and exit. The questionnaire is interesting, and you can do this for employees. You can also do it for visitors as well. For employees, it's a little bit different. As I mentioned earlier, folks like NetApp and other customers that we have want their employees to take these questions before they come to the office or before they come to the plant, right? So if they do have mobile phone capability, and some of our customers have employees that do not, so they end up taking it at the kiosk itself or some other way or using a browser. But they can. The point is they can take these questions before they gain admittance to the facility. If they're carrying badges, we can activate badges based on successful taking of the questions. In which case they're saying, no, I don't have a fever, or I haven't been in contact with anybody. So we're activating badges. In other cases, like I mentioned earlier, the case of NetApp, for example, they're just simply getting an email that tells them whether to come in or whether not to come in. Now you've also got the capability for questions for the visitors, and those can be done at pre-registration as well as at check-in. Just an example, when I went to the doctor a week ago, when I first made the appointment, they asked me certain questions. Have I been out of the country in the last 2 weeks? Have I tested for COVID? Have I been close to anybody who tested? They asked me the same questions when I check in. We do that with the visitor management solution as well. I talked about policy-based badge activation. So, really this is a big topic that we are getting into and that we have the functionality to do you basically can, the way it really works is at the end of every day or the end of every shift or the end of, whatever you want, every 24 hours, you deactivate the badge. We deactivate the badge. Splan's capability, as I mentioned, it is a bidirectional integration with access control. We deactivate that badge. In order for that badge to be activated, our customers are requiring their employees to answer the questions. So they're answering the questions, and that will reactivate that badge for them based on the successful vetting. Again, the questionnaires, again, as I mentioned earlier, for visitors can be doing pre-registration and or at check-in. So again, there's sometimes, different questions, sometimes the same. Sometimes our customers provide the questions. It's configurable. We don't, force a set of questions on you. Sometimes they ask their own questions. We've also had customers who started with like 8 questions and then took it down to 1 because they don't really care which of these symptoms you have. They just want to know if any of them pertains to you. And so they're making it much simpler for their visitors by only answering 1 question, and that incorporates a number of different topics. So again, they can do it at pre-registration. Now, when a visitor is checking in, or an employee for that matter, and they've answered the questions that, they've been out of the country, what we do is we put them on a watch list. We don't just immediately reject them. We put them on a watch list, in which case you can go back for further follow-up. Let's say they didn't understand the question. You're asking, have been out of the country in the last 2 weeks, and they're hearing, have been out of the city in the last 2 weeks, right? So if they don't understand the question, you can go back and ask them again. And then once you ask them again, if you determine that, well, really you didn't answer the question that what we asked, you can let them in. So you always have to have a backup plan for these things to be able to go back and really override things or ask things again, for further vetting that you can do, whether it's questions, or we'll talk about temperature check in a minute, do the same thing there as well. Temperature check, we now have the ability to work with a couple of thermal devices. One is a thermal device that fits with the kiosk. So we do sell kiosks. We source kiosks, and we've worked with the manufacturer of the kiosk to provide a little holder on that kiosk so you can actually mount the thermal device right onto the kiosk itself. So now when somebody comes in, they walk up to the kiosk, you're automatically taking their temperature. And again, you can store the actual temperature, or you can store pass-fail, right? We've got a second a thermal device that actually attaches to a workstation. So if you're using, somebody sitting there and they want to take the temperature, there's a second camera that we can actually recommend for that we are integrated with now. We've spent a couple of months working on these things, making sure that the cameras are pretty much of a high degree of accuracy. And we build integrations with them. We are also asked from time to time, can you integrate with a different camera? Sometimes we can, because that camera has the ability to do an integration, and sometimes we can't if that camera is based on a technology that really doesn't allow people to integrate with it. Then we don't. We have a very robust connector team and an open API and very open technology, very modern technology. So we can integrate with different things as well. Again, now after the visit, you can send out an email to people who've been on site. It can have a survey in it. It can have different questions you're asking about, are you now experiencing any symptoms of COVID? If they come back and they say yes, what you can do is run a contact tracing report. So you run the contact tracing report, the security administrator can run it, and then now you know who that person has been in contact with when they were in site. So you reach back out to them, that person, and then you can follow up with that person as well. We've got the capability to do enforced social distancing based on different categories, which I'll talk about in just a minute. But once somebody is on site, you can also enforce social distancing because we've got a Bluetooth and beaconing technology built into the mobile app that we have. So if people get within the policy of, say your policy is 6 feet, and you want to enforce this in cafeterias or meetings or other things, the two mobile phones can actually buzz each other if they get within that policy distance, right? So in other words, it employs some beaconing, some Bluetooth technology, and if you get within that say 6 foot, if that's your policy distance, then they're going to buzz each other. We also have, we can also enforce social distancing at pre-registrations. So let's say you've got a capacity for 10 visitors to come in, and you're pre-registering people, and you're getting to the 11th visitor. The system will alert you, right? That basically you are going over your capacity limit. Now, of course, you can override that because you may have a meeting. This person's critical to come in, so you're going to be able to override that. Or administrator or somebody with a proper authorization can override it. But at worst case, at minimum, you're getting the error message that you are going over that capacity limit. That's during the pre-registration or the invitation stage when you're setting up a meeting. Also, we have the capability to do that at check-in. So at check-in, you can enforce pre-registration or enforce capacity limits so that you don't check people in more than what you're supposed to. And so when they're checking in, you're enforcing that. Again, you can put them on a watch list, you can override it, or you can wait till somebody checks out to let that person come in. You can also set up employee testing events. If you have employee testing events and you want people to use their badge to check into those events, you could do that as well. And then if you want to record results, you can do that, or you can also have that policy-based badge activation, deactivation. So let's say somebody goes into an event, they test positive, the system can automatically deactivate their badge so they can't get back into the facility. So, different types of things like that. And I mentioned event management as part of the overall solution. This is you don't need to license that module. This type of event comes with the COVID module. So again, you can have different kinds of events with the event management module. This type of a testing event comes with the COVID module. And then again, excuse me, we do have the capability to enforce shifts. So if you have different shifts and people are, assigned to different shifts, basically what you can do is enforce sign-in for employees and their shift schedule. Again, it's really around capacity planning and not making sure that people come on, outside of their shift. We can control their badge access based on the shift that they have. And again, you can override it, but what we're trying to do is enforce capacity limits and make sure that people only come for their particular shift and they don't come off shift unless, of course, and again, different employees can have different shifts. You can have a supervisor crosses over shifts. You can have somebody who has to come in an emergency all the time, so you really don't apply the policy to them. Or again, if somebody, like let's say you have an emergency and somebody is out, they've called in sick, and somebody has to come in off shift, you can override all these things. So it's not hard enforcement, it's enforcement with the capability to override. We do have from the mobile app the capability to report suspicious activity. You've got incident management, so you can report incidents on the mobile app. You can also get information about COVID or emergency evacuation alerts. So the mobile app gives you a lot of capability around COVID that you can do. Whether it is you're reporting an incident, whether you're getting information. And again, you can attach files and things like that to it. So basically, the mobile app gives you a lot of capability, specifically around around emergencies and things like that. And then we also have the capability, finally, with the, if you have disinfection, let's say you're doing disinfection of conference rooms, right? And you have a schedule. We can maintain the safety cleaning schedule. We can notify the cleaning staff about sanitation procedures and schedules, et cetera. We can enforce policy by tracking the process. And then, of course, we can generate reports and dashboards about this whole process and safety cleaning, et cetera. So that's where the facility disinfection comes in as well. So that's my presentation. I want to thank you all for attending. If you've got questions, please send them in. Patrick's going to ask those questions, and I'm happy to answer them.
Yeah, thank you, Pat. If anyone has any questions, feel free to, unmute yourself. None came in on the chat. It was pretty straightforward. Yeah, we appreciate Pat highlighting our client NetApp, who's deployed this globally, and some of their kind of integrations and stuff like that they've been doing. So, which is pretty neat.
Right. Autoliv is another one, a very successful client with a solution. And as
Yes.
I mentioned earlier, the nice thing about the solution is it can grow. Okay. You can start with a single lobby and then add more lobbies as you decide that, hey, this is working great. We've got our policies the way we want them. We've got our workflows the way we want them. We run and roll it out to another location. That's kind of the approach that Autoliv has taken.
Yeah, no, that's definitely true. So if anybody needs to get pricing on that, you can see the email to Splan, also sales@stonesecurity.net. We'll take care of you.
this actually, it's really better to reach right out to the Stone Security folks. We work with Stone Security. I have the sales@splan.com up as just kind of on a common slide, but it's really much better to go right through the Stone Security folks and reach out to them for any kind of requirements or questions or things like that you have.
Cool. Well, hey, we won't take anybody else's time. We appreciate everybody today spending the time with us. Thanks again, Pat. And we'll sign off again. Thank you and have a great weekend.
Thank you as well.
Right on. Take care.
Bye.